Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Right Path podcast, where being an author, an actual author, still matters. This is the podcast that's for authors, it's about authors, it's done by an author, where we share our journeys. All right, we explore our creativity, but most importantly, folks, we examine the why behind it all. We have a fantastic guest with us today, and frankly, I had to figure out what we could talk about because she has a list of accomplishments as long as my arm. So we had to kind of narrow it down, but this lady has done so much work. Most prominently, and what we're going to talk about today is she's the author of The Secrets We Conceal and also the Southport Series, the trilogy. So please welcome to our show author S.R. Fabrico. How you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. And what a wonderful introduction. That was so kind of you. I think that was way more fabulous than I deserve.
Well, you're being way too kind. I mean, I was sitting here, folks. I'm not even kidding. I'm like, okay, well, you wrote these 9 books. Are we going to talk about those? And she's like, no, no, not today. I mean, you've done so much, Stacy. It's like just wow. How did all this start for you? Give us a little bit of an idea. How did this all begin?
So I always like to tell people because it's quite funny. Actually, my degree is in mathematics. And I did not really enjoy writing growing up, and I didn't even really start reading a whole lot of books. I mean, I read books as a kid, but I didn't really start reading a whole lot of books until I was in my mid 20s. Um, and then I fell in love with reading, and I've been an avid reader ever since. But when I guess it was around 2018, I decided that I wanted to just share this story with my husband. So at that time, we were married just under 20 years or so. And I had gone through some child sexual abuse as a kid, and I didn't really tell he knew about it, and but not very many other people knew about it. And it was, just kind of, it's part of it, for anybody out there that's been through that, I mean, it's just kind of part of your life. And it's part of intimacy, just different things that you have to learn to cope with and go through, and whatever. And I just wanted him to know what a big part of that healing journey he was for me, because he didn't quite understand. I felt like I had, all these years we'd been married, try to articulate to him, what he did for me. And I didn't feel like it was ever quite right. I don't know, like it wasn't quite landing right, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I couldn't, through spoken words, I couldn't get the point across. So I decided to write him a book for Christmas. And I shouldn't say that. I decided to tell him a story for Christmas. I literally wrote it on my computer. I had no idea what I was doing. And I printed it out on a printer at Office Max, 3-hole punched it, stuck it in a binder, put it in a box, and wrapped it up, put it under the Christmas tree for Christmas. And that was it. And what the beautiful thing about it was that he was able to read the story, and we talked so much about it, and it was super therapeutic. And I think he really understood now the impact that he had, and just what a special thing that was. And it was just, it was a great communication breakthrough for us, I guess, in that regard. And I didn't really give it much thought. I never set out to be a writer. I was telling my husband a story. And then fast forward to COVID, we all have our crazy COVID story, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's experienced something in one way or another. And I just kind of, during that time, I had a little bit more free time on my hands. And I thought, what do I want to do with myself right now? Who knows? So I have this story that I wrote my husband. It was 88,000 words, I think at the time, 89,000 words or something like that. I'm like, maybe I should try to do something with this. Um, and so that's kind of how it all started. I took that story that I wrote for my husband, and I actually went through the process of turning that into an actual book. And I published it in 2022, I believe. And I absolutely fell in love with writing. And when I published that first book, the process of telling the story and then editing it, over and over and over, and just making sure that every word is right on the page, and then seeing it come. I actually have a copy of it here. Like seeing it come to the cover. Oh my
Nice.
gosh! Like getting the cover back for the first time, and then holding my first book in my hands. It was just like the most amazing experience ever. And I fell in love with it, and then I just couldn't stop writing. as you can see. And so I just continue to write and write and write, and there you have it. So that's kind of how I got into writing. I will say that I it was a coach, a cheerleading and dance coach, and the dance portion specifically requires a lot of creativity. And I was coaching at the highest level, so I took my dance teams to the world championship.
Wow.
And yeah, it's actually a really cool, awesome experience. And we got to go and represent the United States of America. We actually won in 2015, which was super cool. And it was actually pretty neat because I think it was it may not have been the only time, but that particular year, the three American teams, so only three teams per country can be represented. And so the three American teams won gold, silver, bronze, and gold, silver, bronze, which was really cool. So we were all up on stage with our flags and hugging each other and just, anyway, sidebar, not related to writing, but it is kind of in a sense that my routines would be they would be like a story. They would tell a story, and it was very creative. And I honestly think that in hindsight, I did not realize this at the time. So even though I have a math degree, I'm a very creative human. And at the time, I retired from coaching in 2018. And then that's when I wrote that story for my husband. And I think I was missing that creative outlet. So when COVID happened, it was just an easy way for me to get all of that creative energy out that I had not been using for a year. And then it was like, wow, I can take all of that creativity that I have, and I can, instead of coaching, because I'm not doing that anymore, I can put it here into books. And I just I just fell in love with it.
My goodness. First of all, I love the way you tell your stories. Okay. Because I mean, you are just electric right now. It is, if folks, if you're not watching the video version, and I hope that you're getting this through the audio, but this lady's on fire. It's just amazing, really. I love your energy and your spirit. The Secrets We Conceal then was the first time you had ever put anything together in book form,
Ever.
and that launched all of this other
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
I've got to know because the, I know you can't fully understand it unless you've been through it, but the healing that goes through something like this,
Yeah.
the connection, the way you and your husband were able to communicate over this because of what you did, to have that be the thing that launched all of this new, wondrous, beautiful stuff in your life.
It's kind of
Is
crazy,
that
right?
healing? Yeah, I mean, it's almost
I
ironic,
mean,
but it feels like the biggest piece of healing you could ever have.
so absolutely, yes. And I think that, one of the conversations that I always had with my husband about it prior to writing the book, I mean, because like I said, he knew, before we got married, even that this had
Yeah.
happened. Of course, I told him before we got married. And I think one of the things I always said to him was, as horrible as it was, it is part of who I am, for good or for bad, and I don't know, it is what it is. And I always try to see the positive in everything. I feel like because of that experience, and just, so this was just another example of that, I guess you could say. And the thing that was really, I think most special, probably, I don't know if special is the right word, but the thing that was really crazy about it was,
Yeah.
I had told my husband, and I had told my mother. She passed away. I didn't tell my mom until I was like 18 or 19. And so I told no one while it was happening when I was a child. Like, I didn't tell anyone. And then I told my mom as a an older teenager, and she passed away shortly thereafter. So didn't even really, like, she got sick and then was sick and then passed away. And so there wasn't really any time to even like do anything with that information.
Right.
Um, and I never told anybody else. And then I wrote a book and told the world. And
Yeah.
um, my brother and sister, who are 10 and 11 years older than me, we are very close. And that was probably one of the hardest things. Like, I had written it, given it to my husband, then, like I said, fast forward to COVID. Now I'm editing it, and I know that I'm getting ready to publish this book. And I still have not told them, like, that I've written the book, that the book is coming out, that this is what the book is about, and I was just really kind of dreading that conversation. And, because it's just hard to talk about it at that time. Even still, it was hard to talk about, and honestly, when I published the book in 2022, I would not have been having this conversation with you. I've come a very long way. So anyway, it was very therapeutic to talk to my siblings. I let them know, what was happening, and they kind of were like, we thought something when you were younger, but we never knew exactly, And so thank you for telling us. And I gave them, I sent them copies of it in advance so that they could read it. My brother did not read it actually, but his wife did. And he was like, I don't need to read it. I don't want to read it. I don't want to know, like what happened, but they were super supportive. We did a gigantic book
Wow.
launch party where I
Good.
live, and they came. So we don't even live in the same state. They came, my whole family came, my nieces and my brother and sister and my brother and sister-in-law and all of their kids. And it was really cool. I'm gonna get choked up. It was a really cool experience. And then, I published this book. It's funny because you don't like actually think that anybody's going to read it, right? And I mean, you hope they do. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? But like, I'm a realist. I'm like, who am I? Nobody's going to read this book, right?
Right.
And I put it out there, and I remember looking at my husband. We stayed up until midnight. He pre-ordered it on his iPad from Apple Books or whatever, just so we could see it like drop at midnight. And we got a notification that this book, that the book came or whatever, and just to see all of that and experience all that. So we stayed up till midnight, and then I looked at him and I'm like, okay, there's no turning back now. Like that's it. Like it's done. It's out. I can't take it back. The whole world's gonna know. And my dad's side of the family, he had 13 brothers and sisters, so I have a gigantic family. We're not super close anymore. We're just all over the country. We don't always keep in touch, but I would say shockingly, the majority of them read it, and come to find out all these years later, there were other family members that were affected that I didn't even know about. But all of that is now coming out because of my book.
Because of what you did.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And I think one of the most special things is I still to this day get emails because in the book I have my email address. People can email. Actually, I'm not sure if I have now. I have some link to my website or something where they can get in touch with me.
Yeah.
And I still every, probably once a month I get an email from a reader. Just thank you so much for writing this book. One lady told me that she also was a victim of childhood sexual abuse. She took it to her therapist and they read it together. And then, I've had men that have read, said my sister went through this and I didn't understand, and now I understand better. Or, one woman emailed that she had learned this about her mother and that the book really helped her kind of understand. So that's really been such a cool part of just knowing that it's hard to tell those stories, but that you're helping other people in doing so. So that's been a pretty cool byproduct of doing it. I never thought about any of that. I was just going to publish this book because I took the time to write it for my husband, and I had nothing to do with my time. And I was like, I did all this work. Let's publish it. You know what I mean? And then, like you said, who knew that would springboard into, three additional novels, a nonfiction work, and I have eight sports journals and a journal for women, and another novel on the way.
I'm I'm still just shaking my head right now. Stacy, I don't even know what to say. I mean, how brave comes to mind. When you were doing this, you were doing it to tell your husband, thank you. That was one of the first things that you told me when you and I met, through our writing back and forth, about you coming on the show. That hit me really hard because that was such a unique and that was a unique and close emotional connection way to actually discuss all that.
Yeah.
To have that with your husband, I thought that was one of the strongest things I'd ever really read. So immediately I was like, I really want to talk to you. I think this is great. Please come on the show. And then the more I talked to you, the more I found out, I keep just shaking my head because most people would not have that sort of strength, that sort of wherewithal. Where does that come from?
I honestly think it comes from my family. I feel like my my mom and dad were just very much, my mom was a suck it up buttercup kind of girl. It was like, it doesn't matter what you're going through, everybody's going through something, and you've got to just figure out a way to make it till, to just get through it. And that's just all there is to it. And I feel like my sister is that way. I feel like my brother is that way. My dad was first generation Italian. His parents didn't speak English. They grew up very poor, and he was determined to kind of live the American American dream. And he did, several of his siblings didn't even graduate from high school. My dad didn't go to college, but he went to trade school and he opened a sheet metal fabrication shop. And he created, a successful business started from a kid that, he all the odds were against him, I guess you could say, and he built this great business, and it wasn't easy, and there were definitely hard times, and as a kid I witnessed all of that, and it was just kind of like you gotta figure it out. It's okay to feel sad or to feel hurt or to feel whatever you want to feel that's going on in your life, but you can't live there. You can't simmer in that moment. You gotta move on and move forward. And I don't know. I feel like I have to attribute that to my family, my upbringing. Um, I don't know how to be any other way. I think sometimes I talk to my husband a lot about, when you experience certain things that are difficult in life, you kind of learn to really appreciate and be grateful for the not difficult things in life. And I think for me, it's, I can't especially that experience as a child, it was so traumatic that if I just let myself go there all the time, then I would be a very different person. And I don't want to be that person. So I choose to, find the light and be happy and see the good in things because we have that choice. I didn't have a choice in what happened to me, but I do have a choice in how I react and how I move forward with my life. And so that's what I try to do every day. I'm not perfect at it, and there's definitely moments where I'm not, you know, always positive, and I'm living in my feels for the day. But you got to shake it off and keep on moving,
Yeah.
So.
It's amazing, amazing the support you have from the family, from your husband, to be doing this, to be putting this out. If you don't mind me asking one last question about this particular
Sure, of
topic,
course.
and I really appreciate how open you've been about it. What was your biggest fear putting this out there?
I think with any of my works of writing, this one was a little different, obviously, but
Sure.
uh, judgment. I think because you're putting yourself out there to be judged, essentially, that's what writing, I mean, that's any form of art, right? You're not
Right.
putting it out there for that reason, but that's inevitably what's going to happen. Whether that judgment is good or bad, judgment is coming one way or another.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of, telling the story was extremely I was extremely fearful of that. And I honestly just it was kind of like, okay, once I decided to do it, then there was no turning back. And that was the end of that. I'm not the kind of person that I'm not going to put all this work into something and then just, oh well, that's not going to happen, or change my mind. So once I caught all the way through to the end and I was holding my book in my hand with my beautiful cover, I'm like, there's no way I cannot go through with this, and I just have to do it, and whatever will come maybe, you know what I mean, like that's it, and we'll see what happens, and we'll just deal with each thing as it comes. And I would say that was my biggest fear, just, I mean, it's a tough story to tell, and how is it going to be received, I mean, and there's still hateful I have some hateful reviews, and I'm like, my goodness. Yes, I know it's.
I mean, how could anybody hate what you're? I
Well,
mean,
I know I
my goodness, really?
the one that sticks out to me in particular is the person she did not finish it, and she said something like, I couldn't continue reading. I felt like a middle schooler, wrote this book. And I'm like, well, I mean, in the beginning of the book, the main character is a middle schooler, and
Well,
she is growing up, as time goes on. That is the one thing that I will say that I really do enjoy about the book. So it is a fiction based on a true story. I chose to write it as a fiction, not a memoir or a nonfiction, because I wanted to be able to um, just I wanted to be able to have something that people could really kind of get into and digest, and I wanted them to really be in the story. And I just didn't feel like a memoir or a nonfiction would do the same thing. At least in my
right.
mind, as a brand new writer, that's what I thought anyway. So I wrote it as a fiction based on a true story. In the beginning, like I said, I wouldn't even tell people that it was my story. They would ask me, and I would be like, "Oh, it doesn't matter," like I would just because I was afraid to admit it.
Yeah.
Now I'm much more comfortable talking about it. But oh my God, what was I? What was my point?
You, it's okay. You were talking about the hate that you got, and I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, how in the world did you get hate for something
So
like this? So,
yes, thank you.
uh,
So that's one of the things I like to point out. So it does tell the story, and you can, it really does bring the reader along for this, for the main character. Her name is Laura. So it does bring the reader along for Laura's experience as a child, but the purpose of the book, because it was written, because I'm the one that wrote it for my husband to kind of help him understand, it is more about the journey of her growing up into, teenage years, finding a partner, going through those challenges, dating, what's that like, college, into marriage and intimacy, and figuring out how to just kind of find herself, and how she's going to, just live her life, I guess. And so it's a journey of healing, I feel like, ultimately, even though it does have some rough spots, obviously, but you kind of have to have the bad to get to the good, right? So
right, absolutely. Well,
yeah, so it
and
does have a
you have to
happy ending, I
recognize
feel
it.
like.
Yeah, it does have a happy ending.
It
That's not
does.
okay. I mean,
Yes.
if you wrote it for your husband and you gave it to him for Christmas, I certainly hope that there's a happy ending at the end of
Yeah. Yes.
it.
Yes.
So that's it's just wonderful. I mean, it's amazing because hate is everywhere, no matter what you're doing.
100%.
And I think it's safe to say that you triggered something with that particular reviewer, and that's probably more on them than anything else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Which,
but
it's okay. I mean,
yeah,
whatever. I have a lot of really great reviews and
I'll bet.
a few not so great reviews, and that's okay. People are entitled to their opinion, and not every book is for every person. That's why there's a lot of books, right?
Exactly right. There you go. Great attitude. No, I got to say, if I'm a book, I don't want to be the book that follows that book. What was your next book?
So that's so true that you say that. And I was actually like so terrified to publish my second book, because I was like, oh my goodness, are people going to think that this is as good as the last book? Like, is it going to be, are people going to read it? Like, are they going to now they're judging you against, not just judging you in general, but now they're judging you in general, and they're judging you based on a previous work
Right.
so that was very stressful. And ironically, I had, started a book that, so I felt like I didn't want to, um I published this book as a women's fiction. My editors suggested that I do a psychological thriller, call it a psychological thriller. I actually did not put any of that in my when I published it, because I just, like, I can't put the word thriller with this. Like, I just can't do it. But now that when I'm at book fairs and different things like that, I will tell people that, because that really, I mean, it is a very psychological book, and it does kind of, there are a lot of chapters that keep you on the edge of your seat. So I get it now, but at the time I was like, no. Um, but anyway, I didn't really want to live in that space, but I felt like, you gain a following of readers, and you kind of have to give them a similar, you can't just jump to something else. So I started a book that was going to be about human trafficking. And I thought that that would maybe be a good way to, like, switch, like, not switch, but a bridge to where I wanted to go, which was romantic suspense. And so I thought it might be able to, like, kind of navigate me over there. Long story short, I did a bunch of research, and then I got 13 chapters into that book, and I just decided one day that I don't want to do this. Like, I want to write something else. So that book is deleted, gone, trashed, whatever. And I was having a lot of stress at work at the same particular time.
Mhm.
And I was just really struggling. And I looked at my husband one day. My brother lives in Southport, North Carolina, which is a very small, tiny little beach town on the coast of North Carolina. And I was like, I just need to get out of here for a couple days. Like, I need to just get away. I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna go see my brother and hang out with my brother and my sister-in-law and for a couple days. And he's like, okay, totally, I understand. So I got in my car and I left, and I went and stayed there, I think 2 or 3 days. And I brought my computer with me, and I was telling them that obviously I had just published, The Secrets We Conceal, and I was telling them about my other book and that I was trashing it, and I was kind of looking for new inspiration for a new book, and I wasn't really sure, but I knew I wanted to write, kind of stay in the women's fiction, but write romantic suspense. Like, I want there to be romance involved, I want there to be suspense involved, et cetera, et cetera. So they have to work, they're going about their lives, and I'm like, no problem. I just want to come and chill and I'm going to go to the water and I'm going to hang out, whatever. For anybody that's listening that's not been to Southport, they do have a waterfront, but they don't have a beachfront mostly. It's like it's like a, what do you call it? Like a retaining wall almost, kind of. And there's you can see the water and you can stand by the water, but you're not like on a beach with sand. And so anyway, I they went to work. The first day that we were there, they went to work, and I took my back pocket in their golf cart and I drove down to the waterfront, and I was just sitting there at a picnic table, and I was just kind of watching, and like just people doing their things. There's bicyclists going by and people walking, and dogs, people walking their dogs, and somebody playing catch over here, and the water is like hitting the edge of the, wall, and I'm just kind of taking it all in. So I take out my laptop and I'm like, I think that I'm going to write a story about this town. And so by the time I got home to meet them for dinner, I had an entire outline already like done with a whole story mapped out of what I was gonna do and write. And we go to dinner and I'm like telling my family, I'm like, well, the main character's name is going to be Lizzie, and she's living in, the book starts and she's living in New York City, and she's dating her boss, who is a billionaire, and he owns the marketing firm that she works for. And um, things don't go well, and they have a little spat, and she leaves and goes to Southport to stay with her brother and sister-in-law to kind of just find just to start over. And of course, while she's there, she meets a new guy and she starts a new job, and she's got all the support from her family and, whatever. And so I'm telling them all the details of this book, and they're just sitting there at the table with their mouth. Like, you just came up with all of that, like just in a couple hours while we were at work. And I was like, yeah, I'm so excited. Like, I'm totally ready to write. And so then the words just kind of started pouring out of me. And that book came quick. And as a matter of fact, it was initially going to be a standalone novel. I had no intentions of it being a trilogy.
Okay.
And then as I was kind of writing it, I was like, there's more to unpack here. My characters they kind of take on a life of their own when I start writing. So I have ideas and I have an outline, but the character just sometimes they drive the story for me. And so as this was going on, I'm like, oh, this was not what I had planned, but this is what's happening now. And then I was like, this book is going to turn into three books. And so that's how the trilogy happened. As a matter of fact, I actually had the cover designed and published the first book um, with a different cover, because it was going to be a standalone book. And then it's the same cover, but like a little different. When I decided to do the trilogy, I redid the cover so that we could create three books that kind of matched,
Ah,
in
okay.
the series or whatever. So that's kind of how the second book came along, or it came about. And then the panic that you talk about. So I must have read and reread. I swear to God, I think I read that book 100 times to get the editing, because I was just so terrified that like now people had a standard that they expected from me,
Right.
and I wasn't sure if I was going to deliver. And technically, while the other book that I wrote was fiction based on a true story, I was pulling this, it was a very different, because it was a true story, basically fictionalized. This was all fiction. So it was the first time that I was doing that. So you could kind of almost call it like a second debut novel, sort of.
Right.
So I had all of that like nervousness going on in my mind. And again, it was like, okay, just this is your deadline. This is when you're publishing this book. Like, that's it. Just, you got to get over it and just put it out there, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Goodness gracious. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly this is like in you to be doing this, okay? Because now you do the first book, and yes, it's fiction, but it's based on history. The characters are based on real people. The second book, this is totally fiction. Okay.
Yes.
And unless you're really spending a lot of time down at the docks, sitting at the picnic table, like watching everybody, then these are imaginary characters. So, what was the character development and creation and everything else? How different was that in this trilogy as opposed to what you had to do the first time?
Yeah, so honestly, there wasn't really any, like, you're right. The characters kind of were who they were in the first one. They were fictionalized real people. So
Right.
I had a great connection with like kind of an author coach, and she gave me this template to help build characters. So I have used that
Cool.
every time I have written a book. Even in my trilogy, there's a lot of the same characters, there's new characters introduced in each book. So every time I write a story, I go through this whole big thing, and it's probably 100 different questions that I answer about the character, right down to what their favorite drink is, their favorite color, you know, whatever, their quirks. Some of those things may never even make it into the book, but you like build the person's kind of persona, and then you play off of that. So, if a character, if one of the quirks, for example, of a character is that they have anxiety or they're anxious, then as I'm writing the story, I'm not going to necessarily just say, this person has anxiety. I'm writing them as an anxious character because that's what I described, in my thing. So that's kind of how I build all of my characters. I will say though that for the Southport series, in my first one, Call Her Janie, um, three of the characters were inspired by real people. So,
Oh,
so
now we're getting
their
to it. All right.
yes, so their quirks were, kind of inspired by real people, and then new characters get introduced, and they are also inspired by real people. So I don't want to say, I mean, I don't mind telling you because they know, but so Lizzie is the main character and Call Her Janie, and she starts working at a local bookstore called Bayview Books, and the owner of the bookstore, her name is Helen. So Helen, her personality is loosely inspired by my sister. So she's not my sister. Like that's not the case, but there are things that only my siblings would know when they're reading the book. Like, oh, so they're like little nuggets in there. And then Lizzie is staying with her brother and sister-in-law who live in Southport, and that is Randy and Renee. And Randy and Renee are loosely based on my brother and sister-in-law. So, for example,
Nice.
Randy is constantly wearing like mixed matched clothing. Like he's always got like funky, like he'll have some funky like light blue shorts with some type of pattern, and then like a burgundy shirt that's got no color, and then he'll have like eagle socks on or something like that. That is 100% something that my brother would do. And so like that quirk, for example. So they're not exactly, my siblings, but they're inspired by my siblings, and my siblings, when they read the book, where they caught on to that. And then my brother-in-law, his character is inspired. One of the characters in the second novel is inspired by him, so he kind of comes in the second book. So that was fun, and that's like a reader would never know that, but they all knew it when they read the book, and it just made me chuckle. So it made them chuckle when they read it, like they got all of the read
Yeah.
between the lines types of things, which was fun.
Let's
And
see.
now I wonder, do other authors do the same thing?
Yes, is the answer to that.
Oh,
Yes, they do.
perfect.
But everybody's different, in the way that they do it. So
Yeah,
it sounds like you're having fun with this. You're like, I'm going to
I
write about my
am.
family.
I am. I love it. It's great.
Did you tell them ahead of time, or did you wait and see if they figured out that they were
Um,
that character?
I told them that there was characters inspired by them, and then could you figure it out?
Ah,
And
all
they
right.
did. Yeah.
Good way to get them to read it because
Yes.
they're gonna. I mean, no one
I
could.
have to say, my siblings are pretty good about, they've read all of my books, and they're super supportive in that way. My husband actually is a great, like he reads them, and we talk about it, and he helps me kind of find plot holes. And I have another, my college roommate, actually, she also reads, like I'll send them chapters unedited, before I'm even done with the book, and they'll help kind of, we'll talk about it and decide like what do we like, what do we not like, does the character,
Cool.
need to do something different. My husband and I actually we will actually talk about the characters in the book around the house like they're our neighbors, like they're people, just yeah.
Sounds to me like your husband understands the assignment as a general rule.
Yes,
So, okay,
yes, he loves it. He enjoys being part of the process.
that's great. Now, is he a character in any of the trilogy books?
He was not a character in any of the trilogy books, but he was Tom. He was one of the main characters in the Secrets We Conceal. So he was Tom in the Secrets. So Laura is the main
Gotcha.
character, and Laura and Tom, I guess, are the two main characters. One of the other little fun tidbits for anybody out there that is going to read all of S.R. Fabrico's novels. There are in the Southport series, so it's Call Her Janie, Keeping Janie, and Janie's Hope. There are references to other books. So in Call Her Janie, Lizzie, the main character, is sitting in a coffee shop reading The Secrets We Conceal, which I think is fun. And then
Nice.
Tom and Laura show up and they're visiting the Southport in the second book, I think it is. They like show up for a little visit. And so they're just characters in the story, but if you've read all the books, you know who they are. So anyway, I think that's kind of fun.
Oh, definitely. It's also a little strategic, right? I mean,
Yeah,
a little,
absolutely.
cross
Yeah.
promotion, marketing subliminally right
100%.
there. That's,
Totally. I'm a marketing professional. That's what I do in my
I
in my
mean,
day job.
there. I mean, you just gave it all up right there.
Yeah.
This is
The
not an
math
accident.
the math thing didn't work out so good. So I'm a marketing professional.
I mean, it looks like you're doing a pretty good job of it. Um, Let me ask you about this because the process had to be, I mean, for the first novel, I'm sure there was some sort of process that you were building as you were going because that would have been just completely emotional, I would imagine, in how you did
Yes.
it. Now you're working on a different project. It's the trilogy, right? And so is there a different process in terms of how you write it, how you spend your time, a schedule or, a feeling? How was the process of writing the second batch different than the first one?
So the first one wasn't really like a process of writing a book. It was just me telling a story to my husband. So there was no process, if I'm being honest. There was zero process. It was just writing down thoughts. And then luckily I had some really great editors that helped me organize that. And we reorganized the book actually in a lot of different ways. I deleted a lot of chapters and I added some new chapters. I did a lot of studying and research and kind of taught myself like just things I didn't even know about reading and how stories should flow and anything I could get my hands on that I could read, I did to help me kind of get my first book where it needed to be. So that was kind of how the first one went, which, that was if I didn't have a lot of really good help, that would have been it would have been a terrible book. And then the trilogy, I feel like I had a better understanding of kind of how to do it and what the process should be. And like I said, I found a really great author coach. Her name is Jody Dyer, and she helped me just kind of give me some processes that would make it a little bit easier. So this time I started with an outline. Like I did not have an outline with the first book. So I started with an outline and I do that every time I write a book now. I just create an outline of kind of I basically make chapters. It's just a table. And in the first column is the chapter number. And then in the second column is just kind of like a brief couple words, like what do I want to happen in that chapter? So it might be, Lizzie meets Josh for the first time. And that's all it says. And then, in the description, it might say where they meet or how they meet or some other important factor. And so I kind of just have these notations. For whatever reason, my brain works in where I want the book to kind of end, what I want the aha moment, to be, if you will. That I always kind of know what I want that to be, and then I'm working the story towards that, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how I create my outline. And then as I start to write, now I go back and I review what I put down. Okay, chapter one. What is it that we're doing in chapter one? Okay. And so then I just sit and I think about the scene and what are we doing and how are we getting to this moment that I want to write about. That's the important part of the chapter. That's the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the chapter. And then once I do that, if what I thought for chapter two still makes sense, then I leave it. If it doesn't, then I kind of tweak it and I go all the way down. So every time I write a chapter, I'm like readjusting my outline if necessary. Sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes I don't know what I want to be in a chapter, but I know I need something before I get to. So like, let's say chapter 22. I'm like, I don't know what I want to put here, but I know I need something between 21 and 23 because I just know that that's where the pace and the flow, needs to be. And so I don't know what
Yeah,
it is. And when I get there, the character helps me figure it out. So that's kind of how I do it now.
that's awesome. We're all in this
Yeah.
together, right? Me and the
Yeah.
characters, and that's how it works. So,
100%.
especially if they're living, breathing people walking around your house like the neighbors.
Right.
It's wonderful. I appreciate. I mean, that was very detailed. I appreciate you letting us in on your process like that.
Yeah.
That was really cool. All right, look at this. Um, whenever I almost always ask this question. I probably should tell people, hey, this is a question I ask all the time. But whenever we're writing, we are
Yeah.
writing usually for someone or to someone. Now, on the first book, I think there's a lot of self-explanatory stuff there. But with the Southport series, who are you writing that series and those books for, or who are you writing them to?
So, for me, I think the trilogy was two things. It was for myself to challenge myself to see could I actually be a fiction writer? Did I actually have what it took to do this?
Yeah.
I would say that was the case for the first book, and then it turned into a trilogy. So when I decided to write Call Her Janie, I was like, this is a challenge to see, like, can I really be a writer? Because it's one thing to tell a fiction based on a true story. It's another thing to just create a complete work of fiction that people actually want to read and enjoy.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of for me. But then I think in general, I write for the reader to just lose themselves in a good book. I know that might sound kind of cliche, but I am a very busy human being, and I actually I own several businesses. I'm constantly doing a lot of different things. My brain does not turn off. And so a book for me is, it often takes me several pages to get my brain to stop doing 25 things at once and kind of focus in on the book. And then if I get into a really good book and I can't stop turning the pages, that's amazing for me because it gives my mind a rest. And so I want to do that for readers. I want to write books that they can just lose themselves in and just enjoy the story for the moment that they're in it and forget about whatever is going on, in their life, because we all have things going on in our life. And so that's really kind of why I do it. Now, I did dedicate my books to people, of course, but that wasn't necessarily who I wrote the book for per se.
Right.
I just, so I dedicated the secrets obviously to my husband, and then my Call Her Jeannie. Um, I feel like I dedicated that to. I feel like the second one I dedicated to my siblings. I'm like, oh my God, who did I dedicate the first one to? I don't even remember. Oh yeah, I dedicated the first one to my siblings. I dedicated the second one to my nieces and nephews, and then the third one to my children.
Nice.
And those books are very much about family. So they are, women's fiction, romantic suspense, kind of they take place in a small town. So you could even say like small town romance. But they are also very much family, or you feel the family vibe with that, and the family support, the family dynamics, and all of that is very much an important part of the book. So yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I love it. Absolutely love it. All right. I mean, goodness, I've barely scratched the surface on all this other stuff that I've got on you here.
It's
I
like
may have to have you back on for a
I
part
was
two.
gonna say, we'll just have to do it again.
I'm going to have to bring you back on and say, we were talking about this. Let's talk about all this other stuff.
Yeah,
But in the interest of time, we do need to start wrapping it up.
for
I
sure.
do have another question I want to ask you, of course, but before I get to that one, let's make sure everybody knows how to reach you, how to find your books, how to find out more about you, so on
Yeah.
and so forth.
So I have a website. It's SR Fabrico. That's Fabrico.com. And all of my books and information are there. You can email me from the website as well, but my email is srfabricoauthor@gmail.com. I do book clubs in person and on Zoom. So if anybody wants to do a book club session, I've done several of those. They're lots of fun in Southport too, especially, which is pretty cool. You can buy my books anywhere pretty much that books are sold online. They're everywhere online. They are in some brick and mortar stores, but you can find them anywhere. Anywhere you can find books online, you can find my books. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
Wonderful. Now, is it S period, R period, or does it SR Fabrio?
So for the website, there's no period. It's just srfabrico.com with no dots in between. Same thing
Good
on
deal.
social media. It's at srfabrico_author on all. I've got Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, um,
You got
LinkedIn.
them
I don't
all.
know. I got them all. Yeah.
You got
Just
them all.
if you just Google SR Fabrico, you'll find all the things.
It's all coming up.
Yeah.
I got
Yep.
you. That's perfect. That is perfect. We'll make sure it's all in the show notes for you, of course. So,
Perfect.
but I just like to make sure we get it out there and tell everybody, and then I get to ask goofy
Yeah.
questions like, "Hey, are there periods involved?" And you can say no, and then it works
Of
out.
course. I love it.
All right, Stacy, I love everything you've shared with everybody today. You've been incredibly authentic and generous with your story, with your time. and with letting people in, kind of behind the curtain. And I appreciate that. I know that our listeners do too. Last question I have for you is, and you can go anywhere you want to go with this, because you've done so many different things. My gosh, you could answer this 15 different ways. But what is your best piece of advice for aspiring authors, or maybe newer authors that are out there? Any author who's not quite where you are yet.
So I would say that first you need to decide kind of on, you know, how serious you want to be. If you just want to write a book for yourself and to share with your family, then my best advice is to write it and do it and finish it and get it out there, for that purpose. If it's something kind of for, a legacy later on. If you want to actually try to be a writer and sell books, then you need to be a little bit more serious about it. You need to make sure that you have editors, you connect with people who are professionals that will help you be successful and do a good job. Know who you are. So if you're a writer, you're not an artist. Don't try to make a cover because you're not an artist, you're a writer. If you happen to be an artist and a writer, well, then you can make your own cover. It just depends. So you got to kind of know who you are and what you want. I think that's my biggest advice. And also, one of the things, I mean, writing is really cool. And when you publish your first book, you're like, wow, I did that. It's awesome. But that's like really only kind of just the beginning of it. So know all of those other steps, how you're going to launch your book, how you're going to promote your book, what are you going to do several years later to keep selling your books, if that's what you choose to do. And if it isn't, that's okay too. You just that's why I say you got to know what you want to be. So that would be my advice.
That's incredible advice. I've never actually heard that before as advice for authors.
Oh, well,
That's
perfect.
amazing. I don't know why I'm surprised that you're original right now. That's you've been bringing the fire since moment one. So I love this. Stacy, thank you again for just everything that you brought today. Folks, the author of Secrets We Conceal and the Southport Trilogy series, S.R. Fabrico. And there they are on the
Aren't they
screen.
so pretty?
Call Her Janie. And the second one is Keeping
Keeping
Janie.
Janie.
Got it. And the third one is
Janie's Hope.
Janie's Hope. There you
Yeah.
go, folks. That's right. SR Fabrico, thank you so much for being here. You've been an absolute delight, and I just appreciate every minute.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. All right, folks, that's been another just fantastic episode of the Right Path podcast, where we bring these powerful authors on here with these powerful messages. And the reason that they come on here and they do this is because this is the place where the truth still matters and words still have power. Folks, this is the place for authors who know that every page is a step forward, no matter what you're doing. If we're all moving forward, then you know what? Let's lift each other up. Let's dust each other off, and let's all move forward together.